For the sake of eternal youth and beauty, the woman resorted to transplanting organs from corpses into herself. Decades have passed this way, yet she remains as beautiful as a young girl, while her twin sister has long since aged and withered. In this world exists a kind of mermaid. Legend has it that whoever eats mermaid flesh will attain eternal youth. One day, 3 fishermen obtained a piece of mermaid flesh, believing that consuming it would grant them immortality. However, one turned into a monster and perished violently, while another bled to death the next day. Only Yuta resisted the deadly toxins of the mermaid flesh, surviving and gaining the constitution of eternal youth. Yet Yuta, ageless and immortal, did not feel happy, because as time passed, his wife grew older and older, filling him with great fear. The village's old woman advised him to seek out the mermaid, to break the curse of eternal youth. So, in order to live like a normal human being, Yuta embarked on a journey to find the mermaid. This is a mysterious village without men. Yoko is the youngest and most beautiful woman here. Yet under the pressure of the old ladies, she strips naked and bathes in the icy pool. But the next moment, Yoko is unexpectedly harpooned to death by the old ladies behind her, and after her death, she turned into a big fish. One of the old ladies takes out a small knife and immediately cuts a small piece of flesh from the fish. Early the next morning, this piece of fish appears on the dining table of the old lady's granddaughter, Mana. Seeing Mana relish it, the old lady is delighted. She then tells the other old ladies about Mana consuming the mermaid flesh. Just then, an old lady rushes over, saying that a man has entered their village. They quickly find this man, who turns out to be Yuta, the one searching for the mermaid. But the next moment, the old ladies rush forward, mercilessly stabbing Yuta with their harpoons. After confirming Yuta is dead, the old ladies throw him into a cave. But in the evening, Yuta unexpectedly resurrects. He sees the mermaid corpse not far away, and believes that the village must be connected to the mermaid. So, carrying the mermaid's body, he arrives at the village. The old ladies, upon seeing Yuta discovering their secret, grab their harpoons and rush towards him to protect himself. He wanted to take Mana as a hostage, but he notices that Mana's feet are shackled. He binds her with a cloth and flees with her on his back. However, the old ladies relentlessly pursue them, curling their harpoons viciously. Yuta runs frantically with Mana on his back, finally seeking refuge in the mermaid's cave. There, Yuta removes the shackles from Mana's feet. Mana reveals that the shackles on her feet have been on for 14 years, never removed. At that moment, strange sounds echo from deep within the cave, and a creature resembling a mermaid emerges. Yuta hurls the harpoon at it, but the creature, seemingly impervious to pain, Yuta had to carry Mana on his back, and quickly climbed out of the cave. In order to uncover the truth, Yuta left Mana, who had difficulty moving, here, and returned to the village alone. However, he was soon surrounded by a group of women wielding harpoons. The lead old lady informed him that everyone in the village, except Mana, was a mermaid. Mana is the food they have nurtured for over a decade. The old lady told Yuta that if he could bring Mana back, they would safely let him leave. Yet, Yuta angrily refused. At that moment, Mana was already captured and brought back by others, and Yuta's body was pierced once again by harpoons. The old lady told Yuta that Mana had also consumed mermaid flesh, and thereby gained immortality as a human. However, her fate was to become food for everyone in the village. Humans who consumed mermaid flesh could live forever, but if a mermaid consumed the flesh of an immortal human, they could rejuvenate and take on the appearance of that person. All the villagers in the village were aging mermaids. They nurtured Mana for over a decade, waiting for her to grow into adulthood, to become the most beautiful human form, and then feed her mermaid flesh to grant her immortality. Afterward, all the people in the village would collectively feast on Mana's flesh, regaining new life, and acquiring the same beauty as Mana. During this process, they continuously killed the youngest mermaids in the village to feed Mana. Now that Mana was captured and Yuta was struck by poisoned harpoons, the village's centuries-old wish was about to come true. However, just as the old lady was overcome with excitement, Yuta seized the opportunity, broke free, took Mana in his arms, and set the house ablaze. Yuta finally managed to escape with Mana. They escaped back to the mermaid cave again. In gratitude for Yuta's life-saving act, Mana used her mouth to draw out the venom from his wound. However, the elderly ladies followed the trail of blood. They opened the floodgate that connected to the mermaid cave. All the mermaid caves in the village led to the sea. Once in the water, Yuta and Mana, as humans, were no match for the mermaids. As Mana was submerged in the sea, a mermaid lunged forward and bit her. Instantly, the mermaid transformed into Mana's likeness. Seeing this, Yuta swiftly carried Mana ashore, using a harpoon to fend off the leaping mermaids in the sea. Unbeknownst to him, the old lady who had nurtured Mana had stealthily approached her. The old lady sought to seize the opportunity to consume Mana, but Mana pushed her away. Mana was curious why, after other mermaids entered the sea and reverted to their mermaid forms, she could maintain her human appearance. It's because the old lady was not a mermaid at all, but a human like Mana who had consumed mermaid flesh and gained the ability to live forever. However, she had eaten the mermaid flesh in her old age. From that moment on, she could no longer integrate into human society. In order to no longer be lonely, she is willing to cooperate with the mermaids to help them raise Mana. Yuta can sense the pain of the old lady because they are both monsters with eternal life. Yuta wants to take Mana away from here, and the old lady does not stop him. To her, Mana is so lucky because she not only has eternal life and beauty, but also has the person who can always be with her, while she can only continue to stay here, forever accompanied by the ugly mermaids. After leaving Mermaid Village, Yuta and Mana arrived in the city. Everything in the outside world seemed so novel to Mana, even a stray cat could captivate her. Taking advantage of a moment when Yuta rested, Mana wandered around holding the kitten. However, the kitten escaped, prompting Mana to chase after it. But in the next moment, a truck crashed towards her. Upon hearing from a passing police officer that Mana had been in an accident, Yuta hurried to the clinic. However, Dr. Sheena informed him that Mana was missing. Yuta didn't dwell on it much because he knew Mana wouldn't die. Even if she did, she would immediately resurrect. So, he quickly set out to search for Mana's whereabouts. But after he left, Sheena arrived at a hidden basement where Mana was lying. By nightfall, Sheena undressed Mana and proceeded to cut her arm with a surgical knife. Suddenly, an old woman burst into the room and halted Sheena. However, another young woman complained of a painful hand and urged Sheena to proceed with the surgery quickly. They intended to cut off Mana's arm and transplant it to the woman at the door. At that moment, Mana, who had already shown no signs of life, unexpectedly opened her eyes. Startling the three individuals in the room, Mana sat up, wiped her wrist with a blanket, and miraculously, the wound inflicted by Sheena had already healed. At this moment, Yuta was still searching all over the streets for Mana. By chance, he saw the stray cat incessantly scratching at the clinic door. Yuta realized that Mana's disappearance must be related to that doctor. However, the clinic was now empty. So, Yuta found a police officer to inquire. The officer informed him that today was Dr. Sheena's clinic day, and the patient was an elderly lady named Sawa who lived on the outskirts. Following the address provided by the police, Yuta arrived at Sawa's house. He scaled the wall directly and encountered a white-haired woman. Upon learning her name was Toma, Yuta hurriedly asked her about Mana's whereabouts. However, Toma's face displayed a strange expression. Just then, a monster suddenly appeared and tackled Yuta to the ground. Seeing the terrifying appearance of the monster, Yuta immediately thought of those who had consumed mermaid flesh and turned into mutants. At that moment, the monster lunged at Yuta again, biting into his throat. Early the next morning, elderly Sawa wept bitterly at the sight of the deceased Yuta. While Tamawa appeared indifferent, Sheena simply remarked that the body needed to be buried quickly. However, as they were digging a grave in the courtyard, Tamawa suddenly noticed that Yuta's wounds were gradually healing. When Yuta woke up again, he realized he was being held captive, and it was evidently Tamawa's doing. Tamawa had already learned that Yuta and Mana had consumed mermaid flesh, so she wanted to eat them to gain immortality, eliminating the need to transplant organs from corpses. Yuta immediately realized that Mana was in danger. Therefore, after Tamawa left, Yuta desperately broke free from the iron chains. Just then, Sawa approached Yuta with an axe. It turned out she wasn't there to harm Yuta, but to help him break the chains on his hands. Afterwards, Sawa revealed the whole truth to Yuta. Sawa's family had been guarding a mermaid mound for generations. Inside, there were not only medicines made for mermaids, but also real mermaid flesh that never rotted for centuries. Tamawa was actually her twin sister. 60 years ago, Tamawa fell seriously ill, and their father revealed the secret of the mermaid mound to Sawa, instructing her not to tell anyone. However, Sawa was determined to save her sister. She secretly took a potion from the mermaid mound. But after Tamawa drank it, her right hand transformed into a monster's hand. Overnight, she turned white-haired. Despite Toma's youthful appearance, her internal organs were continuously aging, leading her to transplant organs from others to prolong her life all these years. At that moment, Toma dragged Mana into the dungeon and allowed Yuta to have one last look at her. Immediately after, Toma pierced Yuta's body with a spear and locked him together with the monster she kept. Subsequently, she found Dr. Sheena, seeking his help to transplant her own head onto Mana's body so she could achieve true immortality. However, Sheena hesitated with a surgical knife in hand. Formerly, out of love for her, he had been assisting Toma in transplanting organs from the deceased. However, this time the surgery involved a living person, and the last shreds of conscience prevented Sheena from performing the operation. The already deranged Toma decided to take matters into her own hands. At that moment, Sawa, unable to contain herself any longer, knelt down and implored Toma to stop. She revealed the secret of the mermaid mound to her. However, to Sawa's surprise, Toma had already known about it. The reason she was performing the surgery in front of Sawa was to force her to disclose the location of the mermaid mound, so the group proceeded to the mermaid mound with Mana. Meanwhile, on the other side, Yuta finally managed to kill the monster and escape from the dungeon. Upon reaching the mermaid mound, they discovered numerous potions buried here, and in the cellar beneath their feet lay a complete mermaid corpse. But the next moment, emerging from the shadows, came a monstrous and terrifying creature. Sawa informed everyone that this creature was her father. At this moment, Yuta also hurried over. He told Toma that mermaid flesh was not an elixir of eternal youth, but a cursed and highly toxic substance. Only a few could achieve immortality, while most would transform into such monsters. Live examples were right in front of them. However, Toma still refused to believe him, so she pushed Mana into the cellar to retrieve the mermaid flesh. Concerned for Mana's safety, Yuta immediately jumped into the cellar. The monster then launched an attack on them. With Yuta and Mana working together, they successfully killed the monster. Toma finally obtained the coveted mermaid flesh, but she did not consume it herself directly. Instead, she made Sawa eat it. It turns out that she sought the mermaid flesh for Sawa, and all she did was for revenge against Sawa. It was actually Sawa who desired true immortality. However, their father had warned Sawa that mermaid flesh was highly poisonous and could lead to mutations if consumed. Therefore, she intended to use Toma as an experiment because they were twins. If Toma could achieve immortality by consuming mermaid flesh, then naturally, Sawa, being her twin sister, could too. What Sawa gave Toma to drink 60 years ago wasn't a potion but mermaid blood. After consuming the mermaid blood, Toma underwent a mutation. Although she didn't fully transform into a monster, it was enough to make her suffer immensely. Upon the failed experiment, Sawa locked Toma in the basement. She publicly announced that her sister had long since died from illness, and forbade anyone from approaching the basement. Days passed like this. Toma could only glimpse the outside world through a small skylight. Meanwhile, Sawa got married and started living an ordinary life. 60 years swiftly went by. Sawa's father had long passed away, and her husband and children had departed from this world. It was only then that Sawa finally remembered her only remaining relative locked in the basement. After being confined for 60 years, Toma finally left the basement. However, hatred had already taken root deep within her. She used every means, even resorting to transplanting organs from the deceased, to force Sawa to reveal the whereabouts of the mermaid mound. Toma intended to personally force-feed Sawa the highly poisonous mermaid flesh, to quench the hatred in her heart. But at that moment, Sawa suddenly passed away. Sheena immediately stepped forward to diagnose, only to discover she had died from a heart attack. In that moment, Toma's mind went blank, tears rolling down her face drop by drop. For this day, she had lived on like a monster, barely clinging to life. She had accumulated over 60 years of resentment in her heart, which ended in an instant. In the end, Toma requested Sheena and Yuta to burn everything here along with her and Sawa. Perhaps what Toma had hated all along was this bewitching mermaid mound. Throughout the entire tale, the most tragic figure was Sheena. He had deeply loved Toma since 60 years ago, remaining faithfully by her side even after learning of her mutation. But Toma had long been blinded by hatred. Even in the last moments of her life, she did not say goodbye to him.